Everybody, I'm Dortz, and this is the BSOD Conditionals and Loops tutorial. Today I'm going to cover if statements and for while loops, along with Boolean values. So, here we already know what's going on, but here is a Boolean value. Now the thing with the Boolean value is you can only have it be true or false. That's why it's sometimes called a Boolean flag. You'll hear me mention it as a Boolean flag from here on in. So here we don't have it set to anything, but once we hit our main function, I assign it true. That's how you do it. You can either assign it true or false. And next we have a while loop. Now syntax for a while loop is just while, parentheses, and in those parentheses is a conditional statement, which I'll be covering in a minute. But for now, we just have running. So while is going to evaluate to running, which is true. So while it is true, it's going to do everything within its brackets, which is basically the whole program. We do this to allow it to loop back if the user wants to run through the program again, basically. So while running true, it's going to run everything in here. If running evaluates to false, it's going to break the loop and skip all this and go to the end and move on. But running is true, we're going to run everything in the brackets. So we have some output and some user input, and then an if statement. Now here we have the if statements work with conditionals. Conditional statements: greater than, less than, equal to, not equal to, or an and. The or and are for complex conditional statements. Not equal to is if something is not equal to something else. This equal sign, note it's the double equal sign, because we've already used an equal sign as the assignment character. Duh. So greater than, equal, or less than, I hope we know already. So we have a test case. This one reads if val is greater than 4 or val is less than 4. So that's going to evaluate it to either true or false. We have this expanded out so you can see it a little better to demonstrate if and else. So if val is greater than 4, so if this is true, it's going to do this. Else, which means this is false, it's going to move on to this, which else I have another if statement if val is less than 4. So if val is, say, 3, this is going to be false. This will be true. It'll run this. So if val is equal to 4, it's going to not be greater than 4. It's going to not be less than 4. It's going to hit this one because it's greater than, less than, it has to be equal to. Now this statement is of course redundant for those of you paying attention, because if it's even going to reach here, val has to be equal to 4. But I just put it in there to demonstrate how the equal to syntax is used. And also I have these brackets here, which kinda useless because I only have one statement, but it also points out that you can have an if statement where you can do 100 different things in it as long as it's within these brackets. So if val is equal to 4, it'll do everything within the brackets. Next I'm going to cover a for loop. Now for loops seem a little bit complex, but they're somewhat easy to understand. So the syntax for it is for, parentheses, variable, condition, iterator. So here we have I is equal to 0. And we had to declare I. You can use a previously declared variable, but just for good coding practice I like to use I, and you want to actually create it in the for loop. And then the conditional statement, I is less than 10. No, I is equal to 0, so this will be true for the first condition. And then this, I++, which is an iterator. The I++ statement is simply I equals I plus 1. So the first thing it does is it'll create the variable, then it's going to evaluate this statement And if it's true, it will run this, which is, oh, how I love to count. And it's going to spit out I, which the first time it runs it will be 0. And then it's going to hit the iterator, so I now equals 1, and it's going to go to here again, because it's already made the variable and initialized it. So it hits the conditional statement again. I is 1, which is less than 10, so that evaluates to true, and hits the loop again. So now I love to count, and I is 1. And then it's going to keep going until 9, which will be the last time it hits it, because 9 less than 10, it'll hit the loop. And then it's going to iterate I is equal to 10, which is not less than 10, obviously. So it's going to break the loop, skip this, not iterate again, and move on. Next we have a switch statement, which does seem horribly complicated, and you're thinking, why would I ever use this? But it's very useful for setting up menus and just stepping back and taking a look at it and knowing where things are going instead of having 18 million if-else statements all jumbled up together. So here we have the user enter a value between 1 and 5, and a switch statement, which is switch, parentheses, variable name, open brackets, and all these, case and break. So in the case that the user enters a 1, colon, it's going to do stuff, and then it's going to break the statement, which breaks the switch and moves on. If it's 2, does that, breaks the statement. And you see the syntax here. We don't have a bunch of parentheses and brackets and everything going on. It's just open, very visible, very easy to understand. Here we have the default statement, which is if none of these cases are true, it's going to hit default, and usually you'll want to just spit out something to the user to tell them that they've made an incorrect output, and possibly it'll loop back to the beginning of the input again. But here, we're not going to worry too much about it because this isn't like a full menu. So don't forget to close the brackets after your switch statement. And there you go. So now we have the user enter 0 to exit or a positive integer to go again. So if our val is equal to 0, running is now set to false. Otherwise, we'll keep running set to true. And here it's just good coding practice to always make sure that your Boolean values are set to what you want them to be. But if we didn't notice, this is redundant as well. But good coding practice. So if the user enters a 1, it's going to go back to the top. While running, which is true, it's going to run all this code again. But if we set it to false, the while loop will break because it'll evaluate to false, and it'll hit return 0 and end the program. So that's it for the coding side. Let's go over to the compiler side and see what happens. So here we are on the compiler end of things. I've already taken the liberty of compiling and saving our executable as BSOD. So I'm going to run that real quick and we'll see what we've got. So first we have the value to be evaluated by the if statements. Remember we were banking off of 4. So I'm going to enter 4, which is going to first evaluate that it is not greater than 4. Then it's going to evaluate that it's not less than 4. So it's going to hit that final else statement, evaluate that it is equal to 4, and spit out which is equal to 4. So then the for loop happens, and like I said, it's going to start at 0. It's going to do its evaluation of the conditional statement, and it's going to spit out, oh, how I love to count, and then I, which at that point is 0. Then it's going to iterate the I++ statement, and then it's going to evaluate one more time where I is equal to 1, which is less than 10, spit out, oh, I love the count, and then I, which is now 1, iterate again, and so forth. It's going to keep going until 9, which is the last time it's going to do that, and then iterate one more time until it's 10. When it evaluates the conditional statement, it will evaluate to false and break the for loop. So now we're here to enter the value between 1 and 5 for the switch statement, and let's do 5, which is one of the valid cases for the switch statement. So it brings us through there after it evaluated, and now to our setting the Boolean flag. So we have a positive integer, and that's going to make sure the Boolean flag is set to true. Loop back, hit the while loop. The while loop will again evaluate to true, and it'll run through everything again. And here I'll put in a invalid value for our switch statement. So now it evaluates through all of the cases. All of the cases are false, and then it hits the default statement, which is loser, learn to count. So now we're back at here, 0 to exit, and there we go. That was your tutorial on conditional statements and loops. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and hit me up on the IRC channel or the BSOD forums. And this code, as well as some sample code, will be up on the show notes. And I'll see you guys next time.